You hit the wrong note, the little girl said. Eli paused, his small hands suspended above the piano keys. The sound hung in the air, one wrong note still trembling like a bruise on silence. He turned his head toward the voice, his eyes clouded and unfocused. Who said that? Anna, came the gentle answer. You missed the B flat. It should sound softer there. Eli frowned. How would you know that? Because I can hear it, she said with a small smile. Mama says I was born with music in my ears. Eli tilted his head, intrigued. He was used to teachers correcting him with sighs and impatience. But this voice sounded different, warm, certain, almost playful. You shouldn't be here, he said, remembering his father's rules. Maybe, Anna whispered, stepping closer. But you shouldn't play that note again. It makes the song sad in the wrong place. He laughed quietly. You're bossy. You're off-key. Zoo. Eli laughed louder this time, a clear, bright sound that startled them both. Then show me, he said, moving to the side of the bench. Come on. Sit. Anna hesitated. The piano was enormous, its polished black surface glowing under the chandelier. She looked around the empty room as though the walls might scold her. I don't think I'm allowed to sit there, she murmured. Eli patted the space beside him. You helped me fix the note. That means you're my teacher now. Teachers get to sit. After a long breath, she climbed up onto the bench. Her feet dangled above the floor. The two children sat shoulder to shoulder, one blind, one poor. Both quiet for a heartbeat. What are we playing, she asked. Anything you want, Eli said, as long as it sounds like something real. Anna placed her small hands next to his. Then we'll make something real together. She began with a single note, hesitant but clear. Eli followed, finding her rhythm. Soon the two hands, one pale, one brown, moved like reflections of each other, touching the same melody from opposite worlds. The music began to grow, soft at first, then fuller, richer, like sunlight spreading across cold marble. Anna hummed the tune softly under her breath. Eli picked up her timing, adding chords, shaping her hum into harmony. Their mistakes turned into patterns, their pauses into meaning. The room filled with warmth. Downstairs, Ruth Johnson stopped folding laundry. The sound drifted through the vents, gentle, haunting, alive. It wasn't the kind of polished music played for rich people. It was raw, honest, human. She set the towels aside and listened, her eyes wet without knowing why. The housekeeper, passing through the hallway, slowed to a stop. Even the guards outside the front gate looked up from their posts, catching the faint echo of something that felt like prayer. And high above them, in his oak-paneled study, Henry Whitmore's pen stopped moving. The numbers on the contract blurred. Through the open door came a melody he hadn't heard in years. He rose, following the sound down the corridor until it grew stronger. He knew that tune his wife had once played it, long ago, when the house was still filled with laughter. His heart began to race. When he reached the threshold of the music room, he froze. There, under the golden chandelier, his 7-year-old son sat at the grand piano beside the maid's little girl. Their small hands danced over the keys, weaving sound like silk. Eli's face glowed with joy. His sightless eyes turned upward. His lips curved in a smile Henry had never seen before. Anna leaned in close, whispering something to him. Eli nodded, corrected his fingering, and together they shifted into a new phrase, slower, deeper, impossibly tender. The song rippled through the mansion like a living thing. Henry's breath caught. For a moment he could not move. He felt as if someone had cracked open a door inside him that had been locked for years. His wife's laughter flashed in his mind the way she used to hum that same melody while rocking Eli as a baby. If this moment touched your heart, take a second to share your thoughts below. Tell us where you're watching from and what part moved you the most. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories that remind us how music and kindness can change everything. He stepped closer, not wanting to disturb them but unable to look away. Every note seemed to reach directly into him, pulling memories from where he'd buried them. The night at the hospital. The stillness. The guilt. The years of silence that followed. Eli and Anna reached the final line together. She hesitated, waiting. He found her rhythm and landed on the closing chord with perfect grace. The last note lingered, shimmering in the air like the aftertaste of light. Neither child spoke. They sat still, listening to the quiet they had created. Henry swallowed hard. His throat felt tight. The silence that followed was not empty, it was full, like the pause after a prayer. Eli broke it first. "That was beautiful," he whispered. Anna grinned. "We didn't even know the song. I think we made it up," he said. "Then we should name it." Anna thought for a moment. "Call it When the House Listened." Eli smiled. It did listen. He turned his head toward the door, unaware that his father was standing just beyond it. Even the walls stopped being quiet. Henry took a slow breath, his eyes glistening. For years, he had paid tutors and specialists to reach his son, but none of them had brought that look to Eli's face. This small girl, this child from a world his money never touched, had done what no one else could. He stepped back, careful not to make a sound. The old floor creaked slightly beneath his shoes. Anna heard it. She turned toward the doorway, but Henry was already gone, retreating down the hall before the children noticed. In his study, Henry stood by the window, staring out at the darkening sky. The music still echoed in his chest. Faint, but stubborn. He poured himself a glass of scotch and tried to focus on the documents spread across his desk. But the melody refused to fade. He whispered almost to himself, "Who are you, little girl?" Upstairs, Anna and Eli began the song again, slower this time, with even more care. The house seemed to hold its breath as the notes rose and fell like waves, and somewhere deep inside its stone walls, something long dead stirred awake, a softness, a memory, a beginning. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the Whitmore mansion, painting gold across the marble floors. Anna followed her mother down the long corridor, her small steps echoing softly. Ruth carried a silver tray and a bottle of polish, her expression careful and alert. "Stay close," she whispered, "and keep your hands to yourself. No pianos today." Anna nodded, though her eyes drifted toward the staircase leading up to the music room. The melody from last night still played in her head. It felt alive inside her, humming against her ribs. She wondered if Eli was awake, if he remembered the song too. Ruth noticed her gaze. "Don't even think about it." "But Mama, he asked me to play with him." "That boy has everything he needs," Ruth said, keeping her voice low. "You think he needs you? That's not how this world works." She turned a corner, leaving Anna by the hallway for a moment as she entered the dining room. Anna pressed her ear against the cool wall and listened. Somewhere above, faint notes floated down, hesitant, searching. Eli was playing again. She couldn't help herself. Her feet carried her up the stairs, one step at a time, careful not to make the wood creak. The door to the music room was slightly ajar. She peeked inside. Eli sat at the piano, his fingers fumbling through scales. His face was turned toward the light streaming through the window. "You missed that one again," she whispered. Eli smiled instantly. "I was hoping you'd say that." "You knew I'd come back?" "I hoped you would." He shifted on the bench. "Come on, you sit. I'll listen." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You play. I'll help." She stood beside him, placing one small hand on the edge of the keys. "Try again. G to B flat, remember?" Eli repeated the notes. "Better," she said. "Now listen to how it breathes. Don't rush it. Let it talk." "Music talks?" he asked. "If you listen right," Anna replied. Together they worked through the melody, patient and clumsy, but full of something genuine. Eli began to trust her timing. She began to trust his courage. Every correction came with laughter. The sound grew stronger, more confident. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Outside the room, a housemaid passing by stopped to listen. "The boy's playing again," she murmured. "Sounds different, doesn't it?" Henry Whitmore stood at the end of the hallway, invisible to them, holding a cup of coffee gone cold. He had heard the first notes and followed without thinking. Now he stood in the doorway, unseen, watching his son and the maid's daughter share the same bench. He should have been angry. He should have told them to stop. Instead, he found himself smiling the smallest, most reluctant smile. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen his son lean toward another person without fear. Ruth's voice suddenly rang out from downstairs. Anna flinched. I have to go. Will you come back? Eli asked quickly. If I can, she said, stepping off the bench. I like when we make the house listen. It will listen again, he promised. She smiled before slipping out the door. Henry stepped back just in time, his heart pounding for reasons he didn't understand. He turned toward his study, forcing himself to focus on business. But the sound of that unfinished melody trailed him like perfume. Downstairs, Ruth caught her daughter by the wrist. Anna Johnson, what did I tell you? He needed help, Mama, Anna said. He was playing wrong again. He's the master's son, not your pupil. You could lose me my job. Ruth's voice trembled with something between anger and fear. Anna looked up, confused by the sharpness. But he was smiling. He never smiles. Ruth exhaled slowly, tired. That's not our concern. She turned back to polishing the silverware, her hands shaking slightly. The world doesn't reward people like us for kindness. It punishes us for stepping out of line. Anna lowered her head. Upstairs, Henry sat at his desk, staring at a folder of numbers that suddenly meant nothing. He heard his late wife's voice again, from years ago, the night before Eli was born. Promise me you'll let him feel the world, Henry. Don't lock him away. He hadn't promised. He had built walls, strong ones, but now a child had slipped through. Late that afternoon, Henry called for Mr. Davis. The maid's daughter, he began. She was in the music room again this morning. Yes, sir. I intended to remove her, but you said not to disturb the children yesterday. Henry looked up sharply. I said that? You did, sir. Henry rubbed his temple. Right, I remember. Shall I ban her from the upper floors from now on? Henry hesitated. Logic told him yes. But the memory of Eli's smile, fragile and new, made him pause. No, he said finally. Let her be, for now. Mr. Davis blinked, clearly surprised. Very well, sir. That evening, the sky blushed pink behind the tall windows of the music room. Eli sat waiting on the bench, his fingers tracing the smooth edge of the keys. He listened for footsteps, the soft kind that didn't belong to servants or guards. When he heard them, he smiled. You came back, he said. I told you I would. Anna climbed up beside him. What are we playing today? The same song, he said. Only this time, we'll make it better. The two began again, slower, deliberate. Their hands moved with new confidence. Anna guided him through difficult chords, whispering notes before he struck them. Eli followed her voice, his body swaying with the rhythm. The sound filled the room warm, trembling, alive. In the hallway, Mr. Davis stopped, his mouth tightening. He considered interrupting but remembered his employer's words. Let her be. So he turned away. The music drifted down the grand staircase, through the empty corridors, into the kitchen where Ruth was rinsing dishes. She froze, soap suds dripping from her hands. Her daughter's laughter rang through the melody, light and free. Ruth closed her eyes. She had tried to protect the girl from this world, but perhaps the girl was the one bringing something back into it. Henry listened from his study again. The notes rose and fell like a tide. He leaned against the doorframe, hidden, until the final chord settled into silence. Eli sighed happily. That was perfect. Not perfect, Anna corrected. Just honest. Honest is better, Eli said. That's what my mama used to say. Anna smiled. Then she was right. Henry turned away before they could see him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man at the top of the world. He felt like a man standing outside a window, listening to his own heart wake up. The next morning, everyone in the house seemed quieter, more careful, as if afraid to break the spell that had fallen overnight. Even the walls held their breath, waiting for the music to start again. The third morning arrived with the same thin mist curling around the Whitmore estate. And for once, it felt less like fog and more like a secret the house wanted to keep. Ruth moved quietly through the halls, polishing the brass frames that held photographs of people she would never meet: Henry's ancestors, men in suits, women in pearls. She stopped by one picture of Henry's late wife, Grace Whitmore. The woman in the photo smiled with eyes that knew music. Ruth could almost hear the faint echo of laughter behind that still image. "You would have liked Anna," she whispered to the frame before turning away. Upstairs, in the music room, Eli sat waiting at the piano bench. His fingers rested lightly on the keys. But he wasn't playing. He was listening. "You're early," said a familiar voice. Anna peeked in through the half-open door, her braids slightly uneven, her face bright with mischief. Eli turned toward the sound. "I didn't want to start without you." "Then you'll have to start every day late," she teased, climbing onto the bench beside him. "You always wait for me. Maybe I need you to make the music make sense," he said. She grinned. "Then let's fix it together." Anna straightened her back, mimicking the way she'd seen pianists sit in movies. Eli laughed. "You look like you're pretending to be fancy." "Maybe I am," she said, "but the piano likes confidence." She began to play the opening notes of their song. When the house listened, Eli joined in, his timing unsure at first, then surer with each measure. They leaned closer, whispering tiny corrections, laughing when one of them missed. The sound climbed through the rafters and into the air like light itself. In the hallway, Henry stood again. He had tried not to come. He told himself he had meetings, calls, contracts waiting, but something always drew him back. He stopped at the doorway, unseen, and simply listened. The two children were surrounded by sunlight now, gold dust swirling in the air around them. Eli's head tilted toward the sound of Anna's voice, and Anna's eyes softened as she watched his hands find the right chords. Henry's chest ached with a feeling he hadn't named in years. Downstairs, Mr. Davis entered the kitchen, his expression stiff. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "the master has been unusually lenient about your daughter's wandering. I'd advise you not to mistake that for permission." Ruth looked up from the sink. "She means no harm." "That may be," Davis replied, "but not all kindness is welcome here." He left without waiting for an answer. Ruth stared at the closed door, the warning echoing in her mind. That evening, as she tucked Anna into bed in the servants' quarters, she tried to sound firm. "Sweetheart, you mustn't go upstairs so often. People are starting to notice." "But Eli needs me," Anna said softly. "He says he can hear colors when we play." "That's beautiful, baby," Ruth sighed, brushing a hand over her daughter's curls. "But beauty doesn't always protect us. Sometimes it draws trouble." "Then I'll be careful," Anna said, her tone small but steady. "I'll make the music quiet." Ruth smiled sadly. Music never stays quiet for long. The next afternoon, Henry sat at his desk with a file open but unread. The numbers swam on the page. His assistant's voice droned through the intercom, listing meetings, deadlines, obligations, but his mind was elsewhere. Finally, he interrupted, "Cancel the rest of the day." "Sir?" I said, "Cancel it." He stood, pushing back his chair, and walked toward the window. The manicured gardens below gleamed under the afternoon light, every flower arranged to perfection. Yet the beauty felt lifeless, something done for show, not for joy. For the first time, Henry wondered if his entire life looked the same way. He turned from the view and made his way upstairs. When he opened the door to the music room, Anna and Eli both jumped. Anna's eyes widened. Eli's fingers froze on the keys. The silence was sharp enough to break. Henry spoke first. "Don't stop." His voice was calm, even gentle, and it startled them more than anger would have. I didn't mean to interrupt," he continued. Anna glanced at Ruth's warnings flashing through her mind. "Sir, I'm sorry, I was just helping him," Henry finished. "I know." Eli's voice trembled with hope. "Are you mad, Father?" Henry looked at his son for a long moment. "No," he said at last. "I'm surprised." He approached slowly, his shoes silent on the carpet. "What were you playing?" "It's ours," Eli said proudly. "We made it up." Henry nodded. "Play it again." Anna hesitated, her small hands trembling. "Are you sure, sir?" "Yes," he said, taking a step back. "I'd like to hear what happiness sounds like." The children exchanged a glance, then began to play. The music rose again, tender and steady, filling every corner of the room. Henry stood near the window, watching the two of them. He saw his wife's spirit flicker in the way Eli tilted his head when listening, the way his fingers hesitated before landing on the right key. And Anna, this fearless little girl who had crossed invisible lines, seemed to carry the warmth that the house had forgotten. When the song ended, Henry didn't speak for several seconds. "That was remarkable," he said finally. "Music lessons never got you that far, Eli." "That's because teachers always talk too much," Eli said with a grin. "Anna just listens." Henry's throat tightened. "Yes," he said softly, "she does." Anna slid off the bench. "We should go, sir. I didn't mean to break any rules." Henry shook his head. "You didn't. Not this time." She blinked up at him, unsure if he was serious. "Thank you," she whispered. After she left, Henry stood in the doorway of the empty room, staring at the piano. The faint scent of lemon polish lingered in the air, mixed with something sweeter, the trace of childhood, of innocence. He realized, with quiet shock, that for the first time in 7 years, the house had truly felt alive. In the servants' quarters, Ruth looked up as Anna burst through the door, glowing with excitement. "He heard us, Mama. Mr. Whitmore heard us play." Ruth's heart stopped. "He did?" "He wasn't angry," Anna said. "He smiled. I think he liked it." Ruth sank into the nearest chair. "Lord help us," she murmured. "Maybe something's changing." That night, long after the lights went out, Henry sat alone in his study. He poured himself another glass of scotch. But he didn't drink it. Instead, he reached for an old photograph on his desk, Grace at the piano, smiling the way Anna had smiled that afternoon. For a moment, the sound of the children's duet returned to him, soft and clear. He closed his eyes. "You were right, Grace," he whispered. "He needed the world, and maybe I did too." The mansion was silent again, but it was no longer empty. Somewhere above, in a small servant's room, a child dreamed of melodies. Somewhere below, a father who had forgotten how to feel began to listen again. The next week unfolded with quiet changes that no one dared to name. The Whitmore mansion, once a place of polished silence and hollow footsteps, had begun to breathe again. Every morning, faint piano notes drifted down from the 3rd floor. Servants slowed their work to listen. Even the butler, Mr. Davis, though he pretended not to hear, found his steps unconsciously softening whenever the melody filled the air. Ruth noticed it too. She noticed that Mr. Whitmore spoke in a lower tone now, that the air in the kitchen felt lighter, that her daughter's smile had grown into something she could no longer control or contain. But she also noticed something else, the glances from staff, the whispers behind her back. It began with a look. One of the housemaids, ironing linens, murmured, "The boss's son and the maid's girl, playing like they're equals." Another replied, "You think the old man will allow that for long?" Ruth heard every word but kept her face still. She'd worked for the wealthy long enough to know what envy sounded like. Still, the words sank deep, like stones in water. That afternoon, Ruth found Anna in the garden behind the kitchen, picking violets and humming softly. "Anna, come here, baby." Anna skipped over, holding the flowers like treasure. "Mama, did you hear us today?" We played the song again. Mr. Whitmore didn't come in this time, but I think he was listening from the hall. Ruth wiped her hands on her apron. "Sweetheart, you need to be careful. People are starting to talk." Anna blinked, confused. "Talk about what?" "About you and Eli. About me working here. They think—" She stopped herself, unwilling to put poison into a child's ears. "They just think too much. That's all." Anna tilted her head. But we're just playing music. Sometimes, Ruth said softly. That's enough to make people cruel. Anna frowned but nodded, not really understanding. That night, after dinner, Henry asked Mr. Place Davis to bring him the evening reports. As the butler left, he hesitated at the door. Sir, if I may speak freely? Henry glanced up from his papers. Go ahead. It concerns the maid's daughter, the girl, Anna. Henry's pen paused. What about her? She spends a great deal of time with Master Eli. Some of the staff find it unorthodox. Henry leaned back, studying the older man's face. Unorthodox, he repeated. Meaning what, exactly? Meaning, sir, that people may misunderstand. Appearances matter in a house like this. Henry's jaw tightened. Appearances, he said slowly, are the concern of people who have nothing else to show. Mr. Davis's expression flickered, but he bowed slightly. Of course, sir. I simply thought it best to make you aware. You've done your duty, Henry said curtly. When the butler left, Henry sat still for a long moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. It angered him that the man was right in one way people would talk. They always did, but it angered him more that he had cared about appearances for so long. Upstairs, Eli was waiting by the piano. He didn't come today, the boy said when Anna entered. Your father? Yes. He usually stands in the hallway, pretending he's not listening. Anna giggled. Maybe he's busy. Maybe, Eli said. Or maybe he's afraid to feel too much. Can you feel too much? She asked. That's what grown-ups say, he replied, when they don't know what to do with what they feel. Anna thought about that for a moment before sitting beside him. Then let's play something small, so no one gets scared. They began with a lullaby, slow, simple, and tender. Eli followed her lead, each note soft as breath. When the song ended, the air felt warm enough to melt the walls. For a few minutes, they said nothing. The stillness between them was almost sacred. The next morning, Henry joined them for the first time. He appeared in the doorway without warning, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Anna froze mid-note. Don't stop, he said, stepping closer. Eli smiled. Father, we were just making something new. Henry nodded. So I hear, may I? He sat in the armchair near the window, a place his wife used to sit when she played. Go on. Anna's fingers trembled at first. But Eli began confidently, anchoring her. The music rose again, this time bolder, fuller, shaped by the sunlight streaming across the room. When the last note faded, Henry spoke quietly. That, he said, was beautiful. Anna looked at the floor. Thank you, sir. How did you learn to play like that? I didn't, she admitted. We just listened to each other. Henry's throat tightened at her words. Listening, he murmured almost to himself. Something this house forgot long ago. Eli reached for his father's hand. You're listening now. Henry smiled faintly, the smallest crack in years of restraint. Yes, he said. I suppose I am. After that day, Henry began visiting more often. Sometimes he stood by the window, saying nothing. Other times, he asked them to replay certain parts, intrigued by how differently they sounded each time. The mansion changed around them. Doors stayed open. The air felt warmer. The staff, however, whispered louder. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Ruth entered the study. Mr. Whitmore, may I have a word? He gestured for her to sit, though she remained standing. Sir, I appreciate the kindness you've shown Anna, but... Her voice faltered. People are saying things. They think my daughter's getting too close. I don't want trouble for her. Or for you. Henry studied her carefully. Your daughter has given my son something no one else has. Joy. I won't punish that because of gossip. I understand, sir, but gossip has a way of turning into something cruel. Then let it, Henry said softly. I'd rather face cruelty than silence. Ruth lowered her eyes. Thank you, sir. I just hope the world's heart is as kind as you think it is." When she left, Henry sat in the dimming light, feeling both gratitude and unease. He knew she was right. The world wasn't kind, it never had been. But he also knew that something sacred had begun in his house, and he couldn't let fear extinguish it. That night, after the servants went to bed, the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the piano upstairs. Eli and Anna played one final song before sleep, unaware that a man downstairs, listening in the dark, had begun to believe in second chances. The following Saturday dawned clear and blue, and for once the mansion didn't feel heavy. Sunlight poured through the high windows, painting moving patches of gold across the marble floor. Eli woke early, humming the melody he and Anna had been working on all week. The tune was still incomplete, but it felt alive, as if it was waiting for something, a word, a heartbeat to finish it. Anna arrived later that morning with her mother, clutching a small paper bag filled with muffins she'd baked in the servants' kitchen. "They might be lumpy," she whispered as she handed one to Eli. "But they taste like music." Eli laughed. "Music tastes like sugar? It does today." Ruth gave her daughter a warning glance. "Anna, remember your manners." Henry appeared in the doorway just then, dressed in a crisp white shirt with no tie. He looked less like a businessman and more like a man learning how to rest. "Muffins, he asked, smiling faintly. "Smells better than most of what the chef makes." Anna grinned, shy but proud. "I baked them myself." "Then that explains the good smell," he said kindly. "May I?" She nodded, handing him one. Henry took a bite, then set it aside carefully. "You know," he said, "we used to have music in this house every morning. My wife would play while I read the paper. Eli would crawl under the piano and listen. I'd forgotten how different the house sounded back then." Eli tilted his head. "Do you miss her?" Henry's throat tightened. "Every day." The boy's voice softened. "Maybe she hears us when we play." Henry blinked at the thought. "Maybe she does," he said, his voice rough but gentle. After Ruth excused herself to begin her chores, Henry lingered near the window while Anna and Eli began to play again. The sound was fuller now, their rhythm more natural. They didn't follow any sheet music. They made their own, inventing moments as they went. Henry realized something strange. He was no longer just hearing the song. He was feeling it. The melody seemed to travel through him, filling the hollow places that business and logic had carved out. Then, like a shadow passing through light, Mr. Davis entered the room. "Sir," he said, bowing slightly. "A word?" Henry turned, reluctant to interrupt the music. "What is it?" "I received a call from the board this morning. They're asking about your recent absences, and, if I may, about your current involvement with the staff." Henry's expression cooled. "My involvement?" "The maid's daughter, sir. Some have noticed her presence here. I only mention it because appearances again." Henry cut in sharply. "Do you think I care how the board feels about a child who plays piano?" "It's not the board's opinion I worry about," Mr. Davis said carefully. "It's the press. People talk, and rumors grow faster than truth." Henry stared at him, realizing that beneath the man's polished caution was real fear, not for Henry, but for his own position. "That will be all," Henry said, turning away. "Mr. Davis hesitated, bowing once more before leaving. The door closed softly, but the air in the room had changed. The children noticed it immediately. Eli stopped playing. "Father, what's wrong?" "Nothing," Henry said, though his voice sounded far away. Anna looked up at him, her brown eyes steady. "You're worried," she said quietly. He managed to smile. "You're very observant." "That's what Mama says too," she replied. "She says worry makes music sound smaller. You shouldn't let it." Henry chuckled softly. "Then I'll try not to." When she smiled, it reminded him of something Grace at that same age, telling him to stop frowning while she practiced. He cleared his throat. Play again. For me. They obeyed. The song began timidly but soon grew bright again, like sunlight returning after a storm. By the time it ended, Henry's mood had softened. You too, he said. You make this house feel alive. That's because it listens now, Anna said, echoing her own words from before. Yes, Henry murmured, it does. That evening, when Ruth came to collect Anna, Henry asked her to stay a moment. Mrs. Johnson, he began. I'd like your daughter to continue her lessons with Eli. Officially. Ruth blinked. Lessons, sir? Yes. I'll pay her a small stipend. She's done more for my son than half the doctors I've hired. Ruth hesitated. Sir, that's generous, but I'm afraid people might misunderstand. Let them. Henry said simply. I'd rather defend kindness than explain fear. Ruth studied his face, saw the sincerity there, and nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling of the small servants' room, hearing the echo of their song. Mama, she whispered in the dark. Mr. Whitmore said I could be Eli's teacher. Ruth sighed softly from her cot across the room. I heard, baby. Are you proud of me? Always, Ruth said. Just promise me one thing. Be careful with their hearts and protect yours. I will, Anna said, but music doesn't hurt, Mama. Ruth looked at her daughter's glowing face and thought of all the things she'd seen music. Stir love, hope, jealousy, forgiveness. No, baby, she whispered, but people do. Meanwhile, in his study, Henry sat alone by the fireplace. The glow of the flames flickered across his tired features. On his desk lay an old photograph of Grace at the piano. He traced the outline of her hand on the keys. You'd like her, he said softly. She plays like you, honest, brave, not afraid of the silence. The house creaked gently, the kind of sound wood makes when it exhales after holding too much air. For once, Henry didn't hear emptiness in it. He heard promise. Upstairs, Eli dreamed of a stage lit in gold, with Anna beside him and the whole world listening. By the time spring settled over Connecticut, the Whitmore estate had changed in ways no one could deny. The hedges were greener. The windows opened more often, and laughter, actual laughter, echoed faintly through the marble halls. It came mostly from the music room, where Eli and Anna now practiced every afternoon as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Henry no longer watched from the doorway. He joined them sometimes, sitting quietly near the window, a silent witness to a friendship that had begun to mend something inside him. That afternoon, the sky outside was heavy with clouds, but the room glowed with the golden light of the chandelier. Eli was learning a new melody, something soft and restless, the kind of tune that seemed to belong to rain. Anna sat beside him, tapping out the rhythm with her foot. Slower, she said gently. You're chasing it again. I'm trying, Eli said, frowning in concentration. But it keeps running away. Music doesn't run, Anna said. It waits for you to listen. He grinned at that, his small teeth flashing. That sounds like something my father would say. No, Anna replied. He'd use bigger words. They laughed together. The kind of innocent sound that carried through the old walls like sunlight through curtains. Ruth, dusting the hallway, paused to listen. Even after weeks, it still moved her every time the realization that her child was changing not just a house, but the man who owned it. Henry appeared at the end of the hall, holding a book. You're neglecting your duties, Mrs. Johnson, he teased gently. Ruth smiled, embarrassed. It's hard to dust when there's music in the air, sir. He nodded. That's exactly why I can't seem to work anymore. They shared a quiet laugh before Henry continued upstairs toward the sound. When he reached the music room, he saw Eli's hand stumble across a difficult passage, Anna leaning in to guide him. She touched the back of his hand lightly, steadying him. Here, she said softly. Feel the gap before the next note. That's where the song breathes. Eli followed her lead, pressing the keys more slowly, and suddenly the melody unfolded perfectly. Henry exhaled. Well done, he said from the doorway. Eli turned toward his voice, grinning. Did you hear, Father? I finally got it. I did, Henry said. And it was worth every missed meeting today. Anna's eyes widened. You missed work for us? He smiled. I prefer to think of it as a change of priorities. They played for him again. And as the music filled the room, Henry realized something surprising. He was no longer thinking about the board, or the company, or the endless contracts waiting downstairs. He was simply present. For the first time in years, the moment itself was enough. But the peace didn't last. The next day, a black sedan appeared outside the gates. Inside sat two men from the Helios board, Henry's oldest business partners. They arrived unannounced, sharp suits gleaming, smiles thin as glass. Henry, one of them said when he opened the door. We've been trying to reach you. Missed you at 3 meetings this week. Meetings are overrated, Henry said lightly. Come in. They followed him through the foyer, their eyes darting around the once quiet mansion now filled with signs of life, fresh flowers, open windows, faint piano notes drifting down from above. Your house sounds lively, one of them remarked. My son's learning to play, Henry said. He has a good teacher. As if on cue, a small burst of laughter came from upstairs. The men exchanged looks. Henry led them to his study, where they settled into leather chairs. Business talk began: numbers, market shifts, expansion plans, but Henry's attention flickered toward the music that filtered faintly through the ceiling. One of the men finally asked, Who's teaching him? A young girl, Henry said simply. The daughter of my housekeeper. There was a pause, sharp and disapproving. Interesting choice, the older man said. You always did like breaking convention. Henry's smile thinned. Convention built walls I'm no longer interested in keeping. The conversation ended soon after, polite but tense. As they left, one of the men murmured something about public image and appearances. Henry said nothing, but the words followed him like gnats. Later that evening, he found Ruth in the hallway. Did Anna come in to play today? She did, sir, Ruth said, her expression cautious. But Mr. Davis mentioned your visitors. Henry nodded. Yes. And I imagine he also mentioned their opinions. He did, Ruth admitted. I don't want to cause you trouble, Mr. Whitmore. You haven't, Henry said. They have. He started to leave, then paused. Mrs. Johnson, when I was young, my father taught me that respectability mattered more than happiness. It took me 40 years to realize he was wrong. That night, Henry climbed the stairs slowly. He found Anna and Eli in the music room again, their hands moving together in perfect time. He stood in the doorway, watching the two children illuminate the space with something his money could never buy. When they finished, he clapped softly. That song, he said. It deserves a name. Eli tilted his head. What should we call it? Henry thought for a moment. Call it The Beginning. Because that's what it feels like. Anna smiled. I like that. Outside, thunder rumbled, soft and far away. Rain began to fall against the tall windows, each drop catching the light like silver threads. The three of them sat together in the glow of the piano, listening as the storm wrapped the house in sound. For a long while, no one spoke. Then Eli whispered, Father, do you think music can change people? Henry looked at his son, then at Anna, and nodded slowly. It already has. Downstairs, in the servants' quarters, Ruth listened to the distant echo of their laughter and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope not for money or comfort, but for something far rarer. Understanding. But beyond the gates of the Whitmore estate, whispers were already spreading about the billionaire, his blind son, and the Maid'S little girl who played the piano. And though none of them knew it yet, that music, their fragile, beautiful secret, was about to reach ears that would not hear it kindly. Rain fell softly over the Whitmore estate the next morning, tapping gently on the glass roof of the solarium. The storm had left the air smelling of pine and wet earth. The world felt quieter, cleaner except inside the mansion, where unease hummed just beneath the surface. Ruth sensed it the moment she entered the kitchen. The usual murmur of servants had shifted into whispers. Conversation stopped when she walked in. Eyes followed her, then darted away. She pretended not to notice, pulling on her apron, but her stomach tightened. When Anna arrived with her small backpack of sheet music, one of the maids muttered, "There goes the little prodigy." Another replied under her breath, "She's gotten the master's attention. That's for sure." Ruth spun around. "You have something to say?" The younger woman flushed and shook her head. "No, ma'am." "Then mind your work," Ruth said, her voice trembling with barely contained anger. The whispers stopped, but only for a moment. Upstairs, Henry and Eli were already waiting in the music room. Eli sat at the piano, tracing the edge of the keys while his father watched quietly from the window. "Is Anna coming?" the boy asked. "She will," Henry said. "She's never late." He spoke with certainty, but a part of him worried. After yesterday's visit from his business partners, something had shifted in the air. Their words, appearances, propriety, scandal had clung to him like a cold fog. A soft knock at the door broke his thoughts. Anna entered, smiling shyly. "Sorry, Mr. Whitmore. The kitchen was busy today." "You're right on time," Henry said. Eli grinned. "We were going to start without you." "No, you weren't," she teased, climbing onto the bench beside him. Henry watched them begin. The sound filled the room instantly, rich and full of emotion. The two children had developed an unspoken rhythm. They didn't need words. They breathed together, moved together, trusted each other completely. Halfway through the piece, the door opened. Mr. Davis stood there, his face tight. "Sir." "A moment, please." Henry frowned. "Can it wait?" "I'm afraid not." Henry excused himself reluctantly and stepped into the hallway. "What is it?" "There are rumors spreading among the staff," Davis said in a low voice. "They're saying the girl spends too much time here. That her mother is taking advantage of your generosity." Henry's expression hardened. "My generosity?" "Yes, sir. They think the situation looks improper." Henry's jaw tightened. "Improper?" he repeated. "What's improper about two children playing piano? People see what they want to see, sir. And gossip is a dangerous thing. I thought it best to warn you." Henry stepped closer, his voice dropping to a growl. "If I ever hear another word of that filth in my house, you'll be the one leaving it." Mr. Davis stiffened. "Of course, sir." When Henry returned to the music room, the song had stopped. Anna sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes wide. "Did we do something wrong?" He shook his head. "No, Anna. You did everything right. Keep playing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her smile returned slowly, and she began again. The melody filled the silence his anger had left behind. Later that afternoon, Ruth found Henry in the study. She knocked softly. "Mr. Whitmore, may I speak to you?" He gestured for her to enter. "If this is about the rumors." "It is," Ruth said. "I know you mean no harm, sir, and neither does Anna. But people can be cruel. They'll twist anything they don't understand. Maybe it's better if we keep some distance." Henry leaned back, studying her. "Distance is what kept my son lonely for 7 years. I won't build that wall again." Then they'll build it for you," Ruth said quietly. "And when they do, it won't just hurt you, it'll hurt her." He fell silent, the truth of her words heavy in the room. Ruth's voice softened. "I don't want to take this from him, or from her, but I also can't let it destroy what little peace we've found." Henry rubbed a hand over his face. "You're right," he admitted. "But how do you silence a world that refuses to listen?" "You don't," Ruth said. "You just play louder." That evening, Henry gathered the household staff in the main hall. The chandeliers glowed above them, the marble floor shining like water. Every servant stood in a line, Mr. Davis, the maids, the cook, the groundskeeper staring in uneasy silence. Henry's voice carried calmly, but firmly. "I've heard rumors, lies, about my son and the Johnson family. Let me make this clear. In this house, kindness is not a crime. Music is not misconduct, and those who gossip about a child's friendship will find employment elsewhere." The silence that followed was absolute. Henry's gaze swept the room, daring anyone to meet his eyes. No one did. When the meeting ended, Ruth found him lingering near the grand staircase. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did," Henry replied. "People learn respect when someone demands it." Ruth nodded slowly. "Thank you, sir. You may have made things harder for yourself, but easier for her." "Oh," Henry gave a faint smile. "That's a trait I'll take any day." That night, the house was quieter than usual. Even the rain seemed hesitant to fall. Upstairs, Anna and Eli played one last song before bed. A slow, haunting tune full of longing. Eli asked, "Do you think people will stop being mean?" Anna hesitated. "Maybe not. But if we play pretty enough, maybe they'll listen instead." Downstairs, Henry sat by the fireplace, his hands clasped. The music reached him faintly through the walls. He closed his eyes, listening not as a businessman or a father, but as a man who had finally remembered how to feel. For now, that was enough. But beyond the mansion gates, the whispers were spreading again, this time beyond the staff, carried by voices that reached the city. Soon, their quiet world of music and warmth would be tested by the cold judgment waiting outside. The next week brought a sharp wind from the coast, bending the trees along the Whitmore estate. The chill felt different this time, not from weather, but from unease. The staff had grown cautious and formal again. Conversations stopped when Henry entered a room. Ruth noticed it first, a stiffness in the air, a politeness that hid quiet resentment. Henry, however, ignored it. He spent his evenings in the music room, sometimes reading while Anna and Eli played. The sound soothed him. It reminded him that joy could be quiet, unannounced, without needing to prove itself to anyone. But joy rarely stays untouched. On a Thursday afternoon, as the sky turned a pale gray, Henry's assistant, Mark Evans, arrived unexpectedly from the city. A thin man in an expensive suit, he carried a leather briefcase and the air of someone who had urgent news to deliver. "Mr. Whitmore," he said as Henry met him in the foyer, "I wish I could say this is a social visit." "I assume it isn't," Henry said. "What's wrong?" Mark hesitated before speaking. "Someone from the press contacted the office this morning. They claim to have received a tip about your household." Henry's stomach tightened. "Go on." "They've heard that you've been neglecting the company, spending your days isolated here with a servant's child and your son. They're suggesting impropriety." Henry's face hardened. "Impropriety? They're talking about a blind boy and a 6-year-old girl." "I know, sir," Mark said quickly. "But rumors don't care about truth. They're asking for a statement." Henry exhaled slowly, anger and disbelief mixing in his chest. "Tell them no comment, and if they come near this property, I'll have them removed." "Yes, sir." Mark hesitated, lowering his voice. "Henry, the board is nervous. They think the story could affect the foundation deal next quarter. You should consider getting ahead of it." Henry's tone dropped to steel. "If the board wants to talk, they can come to me directly. I don't answer to gossip." Mark nodded, knowing the discussion was over. As the car drove away, Henry stood alone in the doorway, his reflection caught in the glass. For years, he had built his life around control of perception, of power, of image. Now, for the first time, he wondered if control had ever meant peace at all. Upstairs, the sound of piano notes floated faintly through the air. The melody was simple, hesitant, a child's attempt to find calm in a storm. Henry followed it. When he entered the music room, Anna and Eli were deep in concentration. The sheet music before them was blank. They were inventing again. "What are you writing this time?" he asked gently. Anna looked up, startled. "We're trying to make a song for the rain." "It sounds sad today." Henry smiled faintly. "Rain usually is." Eli shook his head. "Not when you listen right. It just sounds lonely." Henry sat beside them, the weight of Mark's words still heavy on his mind. "You might be right," he said quietly, "lonely and honest." They played again, their music soft and careful. Henry watched them, trying to absorb the peace he felt in that room. For a few moments, the noise of the outside world didn't exist. There was only the music, the rhythm of connection, the sound of something pure. Later that evening, Ruth came to him. Her hands were clasped tight, her expression uneasy. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "is it true what they're saying? That people from the city are talking about Anna?" He sighed. "Someone leaked a story." "It's nothing but lies." "Lies or not, sir, they can still ruin people like us." Henry stood. "Ruth, I won't let anyone hurt your daughter. She belongs here. My son needs her. And when the world decides he doesn't?" Ruth's eyes glistened. "What happens then?" Henry paused, his jaw tightening. "Then the world can fight me for it." She shook her head slowly. "You don't understand, sir. When people like you fall, they get back up. When people like us fall, we don't." Henry had no answer. He watched her leave, his heart heavy. That night, the rain returned, harder this time, drumming against the roof. The mansion lights glowed against the storm, a golden island in the dark. Inside, Eli couldn't sleep. "Father," he called softly from the doorway of Henry's study. "Are you awake?" Henry looked up from his desk. "Yes, son, what's wrong?" Eli shuffled closer, his small hands twisting together. "Anna cried tonight." Henry frowned. "Why?" "She said people don't like her being here. She said maybe she should stop coming." Henry felt something sharp in his chest. "Did she say who told her that?" "No. She just said she didn't want to make trouble for you." Henry stood, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "You let me worry about that. Anna doesn't need to leave." Eli's voice was barely a whisper. "Promise." "I promise." When Eli went back to bed, Henry sat alone in the quiet room, staring into the fire. His reflection flickered in the glass like a ghost. The next morning, he called his attorney. "I want to announce the foundation early," he said. "We'll dedicate it to children with disabilities, just as planned, but this time, I'll make it public that Eli inspired it." "That's a strong statement," the attorney replied. "It could deflect some of the rumors." "Owen." "That's not why I'm doing it," Henry said. "It's time this house stopped hiding what matters." By afternoon, reporters had begun to gather at the gates, curious, cautious, unaware of what they were about to witness. Inside, Anna and Eli practiced one last time before dinner. The song was slower now, more deliberate. When they reached the final note, Anna looked at him. "Eli, are we in trouble?" He smiled faintly. "Not if we play louder." That night, Henry stood by the window of his study, watching flashes of camera lights beyond the gates. His reflection looked older somehow, but steadier. Behind him, the faint sound of the piano began again, two small hands weaving light through darkness. Henry turned toward the sound, a quiet determination settling over him. Let them talk, he thought. Let them listen. For once, he wouldn't hide from the truth. He would play it. The morning of the press event dawned bright and sharp, the kind of New England day when even the air seemed polished. The Whitmore estate had been cleaned to perfection, fresh flowers in the foyer, silver polished until it caught the light like fire. Cameras were already lined up at the gates, and reporters murmured like restless birds waiting for a signal. Inside, Henry stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with a hand that trembled slightly. It had been years since he'd faced a crowd for anything that wasn't about business. Today wasn't about numbers or deals. It was about truth, and truth, he was learning, made men nervous. Eli waited near the window, dressed in a dark blue suit that made him look smaller and older all at once. His white cane rested against the chair. Beside him, Anna smoothed the wrinkles in her simple yellow dress, her face solemn. "Do I really have to be there?" she asked. Henry turned, smiling gently. "You're the reason this is happening." "Of course you do. But people don't like me being here," she said. "What if they're mean?" Henry knelt beside her. "Then they'll show everyone who they really are. And we'll show them something better." Eli reached for Anna's hand. "You'll be fine. You always are." Anna squeezed his hand back. "As long as you're playing." Outside, the reporters grew restless. Ruth watched from the hallway, her heart pounding. She wanted to be proud. but worry gnawed at her. She had seen how the world treated people like them, how kindness was mistaken for ambition, how proximity to power was twisted into scandal. Still, when she looked at her daughter's steady eyes, she knew she couldn't stop her now. At noon sharp, Henry stepped onto the stone terrace with Eli and Anna at his side. The cameras began to flash. A hush spread through the crowd as he raised his hand for silence. "Thank you all for coming," Henry began. His voice carried easily across the open air. "I know there have been questions about my time away from the company, about what I've been doing here. Today, I'd like to answer them not with excuses, but with purpose." He glanced down at his son, who stood straight, his chin tilted upward in quiet confidence. "My son, Eli, was born blind. For years I thought protecting him meant keeping him apart. I was wrong. Isolation doesn't protect, it erases. And then someone reminded me of that." He turned toward Anna. She blinked against the flash of cameras, frozen in place. "This young lady," Henry continued, "taught my son more about life than I ever could. She taught him how to hear light, how to see with his heart. And she taught me the same." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Henry continued, his tone firm. "I'm proud to announce the creation of the Light I Hear Foundation, dedicated to providing music education to children with disabilities free of charge. Music is not a luxury, it's a language of equality." He paused, then added, "And if anyone wonders why a billionaire and a maid's daughter would share a piano bench, the answer is simple. Because music doesn't recognize titles. Only truth." A stunned silence followed. Even the clicking of cameras slowed. Henry gestured to the piano set up on the terrace. "And now, if you'll indulge us, Eli and Anna have something to say in the only language that truly matters." The two children sat side by side, small hands poised over the keys. For a moment, all the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the first notes began soft, trembling, but sure. The melody they played was one they'd built together over months. A song born from laughter, fear, and friendship. It rose gently, unfolding like dawn. Eli's fingers found the harmonies by memory. Anna filled the spaces between with quiet strength. The music flowed through the garden, through the cameras, through every watching heart. Ruth stood at the edge of the terrace, tears slipping down her cheeks. She'd feared this moment would destroy them. Instead, it felt like redemption. Henry watched, still as stone. His mind flashed with images: Grace at the piano, Eli as a baby, the long years of silence after she died. Now that silence was gone, replaced by something alive, something beautiful. When the final note faded, the crowd remained silent for a heartbeat longer. Then applause erupted, slow at first, then rising into a wave. Reporters lowered their cameras, some wiping their eyes. Anna turned toward Eli, whispering, "Did we do okay?" Eli smiled. "We made them listen." Henry stepped forward, his voice calm but proud. "If you're looking for a story," he told the reporters, "make it about them, not me. About how music can connect two children the world tried to keep apart." The questions began immediately about the foundation, the program, the future. But Henry answered only the ones that mattered. "We start next month," he said, "and every child who walks through those doors will learn what my son and Anna already know, that you don't need eyes to see beauty, or wealth to deserve it." By the time the crowd dispersed, the sun had lowered behind the trees, turning the sky the color of brass. Henry stood alone for a moment, letting the quiet return. Ruth approached him slowly. "You did something brave today," she said. He smiled faintly. "Bravery usually means cleaning up the mess afterward." "Then I'll bring a broom," she said softly. "But thank you for standing up for her. For all of us." Henry looked toward the children, still sitting by the piano, their heads close together. "They did the standing," he said. "I just followed their lead." That night, when the cameras were gone and the staff had retreated, the mansion glowed with a strange peace. In the quiet of the music room, Anna and Eli played again, not for the world this time, but for themselves. Henry listened from the doorway, his heart unguarded. The melody washed over him, and for the first time since Grace's death, He whispered aloud, "We're whole again." But even as the sound carried through the house, far beyond the gates of the estate, the story was spreading online, in print, on every screen. Not everyone would see what he meant them to see. Some would twist it, question it, turn beauty into scandal. The light that had filled his home was about to cast long shadows. The story hit the headlines the next morning like a storm breaking without warning. Billionaire and Maid's daughter inspire internet with emotional piano duet. That was the first headline, and for a few hours, it was beautiful. Clips from the event went viral. The world watched Anna and Eli sitting side by side at the piano, their music blending like sunrise. People shared the video, calling it the most human thing the rich have ever done. But beauty never lasts long on the front page. By afternoon, new headlines appeared. Whitmore's motives questioned, foundation or PR move, and worse, where did the maid's daughter come from? The same people who wept at the video began to whisper. The same compassion that lifted them turned to suspicion. Henry read every headline in silence. His assistant, Mark, stood by the door, nervous. "Sir, I'd advise you to let this die quietly. No more public statements. No interviews." Henry closed the laptop and exhaled slowly. Do they really think kindness needs a motive? Mark hesitated. They think everything does. Upstairs, the house was buzzing again. Eli and Anna didn't understand the scale of what had happened. They only knew that their faces were on every screen. Ruth stood behind her daughter, brushing her hair. "You remember what I said about the world?" she asked softly. "That it can be cruel," Anna murmured. Ruth nodded. "It can also be jealous. Don't let that make you small." Anna frowned. "Did we do something wrong?" "No, baby," Ruth said, kissing her forehead. "You did something right. And that scares people sometimes." Later that afternoon, Henry gathered the household staff in the great hall again. "You may have seen the news," he began, his voice firm but calm. "Let me be clear. This house will not apologize for doing something decent. Anna and Eli played music together, nothing more, nothing less. Anyone spreading gossip will find employment elsewhere." Mr. Davis, his face pale, spoke hesitantly. "Sir, the press has been calling the gates all morning. Some have been less kind in their questions." Henry looked at him steadily, then stopped answering them. After the meeting, Ruth lingered. "Sir, the truth doesn't protect us the way it protects you," she said quietly. "If people start digging into my life, my past, they'll find a woman who works harder than anyone I know," Henry interrupted. "And a daughter who changed this house." Ruth smiled sadly. "I hope that's what they choose to see." That night, the lights of the estate glowed against the dark. In the music room, the piano stood silent for once. Eli sat beside it, his hand tracing the smooth wood. "Why did people get angry?" he asked softly. "We only played a song." Anna sat on the rug nearby, hugging her knees. "Mama says people don't like what they don't understand." Eli tilted his head. "Do you think my father's sad?" She thought for a moment. Maybe tired. Sometimes grown-ups call that sadness. Henry stood in the doorway, unseen for a moment, listening. When he stepped forward, his voice was low. "You're both right." Eli smiled faintly. "Are they still mad, Father?" "Some of them," Henry said. "But that doesn't matter. What matters is what we do next." "What do we do?" Anna asked. "We play again," Henry said simply. "We keep showing them what music means." Anna hesitated. "But the papers said things that aren't true." "No." He knelt beside her. "Then we drown them out with truth that sings louder." The next morning, Henry announced that the foundation would host a public concert in the city. It would feature Eli and Anna performing together to raise funds for blind and disabled children. He knew it was risky turning a storm into a stage, but he also knew running from the noise would only make it worse. When Ruth heard the plan, she froze. "You're putting her in front of cameras again?" Henry nodded. "I'm putting her where she deserves to be, at the piano, where she's not a rumor, but a person." Ruth's eyes glistened. "And when they twist it again, then they'll expose themselves," Henry said. "Not her." The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. The Whitmore Foundation concert became the most anticipated event of the season. Invitations went out to donors, educators, musicians. Every major outlet requested coverage. Some expected scandal. Others, redemption. Anna practiced every evening, her small hands moving faster, stronger. Ruth stayed close, torn between fear and pride. Eli was different too, more confident, more at ease in the world. He told his father one night, "I don't feel blind when I play with her." Henry smiled. "That's because she helps you see the part of the world that matters." The night before the concert, the mansion was quiet. Anna couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her small bed, staring at the ceiling. The moonlight through the window painted a soft line across her blanket. Ruth sat nearby, folding laundry. "Mama?" "Yes, baby? Do you think I belong there, on that big stage?" Ruth stopped folding. "You belong anywhere your music fits, and your heart leads. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Anna closed her eyes. "I wish you could come." "I'll be there," Ruth said. "Just not where the cameras can see. That's enough." The next morning, limousines lined the street outside Carnegie Hall. A banner stretched across the entrance. "The Light I Hear Foundation Presents. The Children's Concert for Hope." Inside, rows of guests in suits and evening gowns filled the seats. The air shimmered with expectation. Backstage, Henry adjusted Eli's jacket, while Anna fidgeted with her dress. "You both ready?" he asked. Anna nodded, though her hands trembled. "What if I forget?" "Then you listen to him," Henry said, smiling at Eli. "He'll find the note for you." Eli reached for her hand. "We never miss the same one twice." Henry chuckled softly, his heart swelling with something between pride and fear. He leaned close to Anna. "No matter what happens out there, you've already done something extraordinary." She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "What's that?" "You made my son and me here again." When the curtain rose, the light hit the piano like morning. The two children walked out together, small against the vast stage. A hush fell over the hall. Anna sat first, her hands hovering above the keys. Eli joined her, nodding once. And then, they began. The first notes were fragile, hesitant, but then the melody grew, expanding with every heartbeat. The crowd leaned forward, drawn into the sound. Two children, from worlds never meant to meet, creating something that no wealth or title could buy. Henry sat in the front row, his hands clasped. Ruth, hidden in the balcony, pressed a hand to her chest. By the time the final note faded, no one moved. And then, slowly, applause erupted louder than anything either child had ever heard. Anna turned toward Eli and whispered, "Did we do it?" He smiled. "We made them listen again." But not everyone in the audience clapped. In the shadows near the back, a figure watched silently. Expression cold. The kind of person who saw not beauty, but opportunity. And when the applause ended, that figure slipped out the side door, already planning the next headline. The applause from Carnegie Hall still echoed in Henry's mind long after the lights dimmed. The performance had been perfect, more than perfect, it had been pure. The audience's standing ovation had lasted several minutes. And for once, Henry felt that the world might finally understand what this was really about. Two children, friendship, and the way music could heal wounds no one could see. But the next morning, as the sun rose over Manhattan, the world proved him wrong again. The headlines came fast. The photos were everywhere. Anna and Eli, sitting side by side at the piano, smiling. Henry standing behind them, hand on Eli's shoulder. Some praised it, the billionaire who found his soul. Others twisted it. Publicity or redemption? Whitmore's charity faces scrutiny, and then came the ugliest one. Maid's daughter takes center stage. Inside the Whitmore scandal. The article wasn't just cruel, it was invasive. It printed Ruth's full name, where she came from, even mentioning the years she'd worked as domestic help. It described Anna as the young servant girl who enchanted her way into high society. Henry read it twice, barely believing his eyes. By noon, the gate of the estate was surrounded by journalists again. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted questions. Mr. Whitmore, do you have a comment? Is it true the girl's mother used your foundation for financial gain? How close are you to the Johnson family, really? Henry turned from the window, fury burning behind his calm expression. Get security to clear them, he told Mr. Davis. Yes, sir, Davis said, though he looked uneasy. When Henry found Ruth in the kitchen, she was trembling. The newspaper lay folded beside her. They know where we live, she whispered. Reporters came to the gate asking for me by name. Henry clenched his fists. This will end. I'll make sure of it. Ruth shook her head. You can't fight everyone, Mr. Whitmore. They'll twist everything you say. They'll call it a cover-up. I don't care, he said, his voice low. I won't let them touch her. Anna appeared in the doorway just then, clutching the old silver bracelet she always wore. Mama, why are people saying mean things? Ruth knelt, pulling her close. They don't understand, baby. Sometimes people are scared of things they don't control. But we just played music, Anna said. We didn't hurt anyone. Henry knelt beside them. No, you didn't. You showed them something real. And real things make people uncomfortable. But I promise you they won't take that away. Later that evening, Henry made a call to a lawyer he trusted. I want a statement drafted, he said, one that clears Ruth and Anna completely. I'll take full responsibility for every decision made regarding the foundation. Henry, the lawyer replied carefully. You know what that means. The board will see this as a liability. They could remove you. Henry exhaled, looking out over the dark garden. Then let them. I built that company once. I can build again, but I won't let a child pay for my reputation. That night, he couldn't sleep. He walked the halls of the mansion, stopping at every place where music had once lived, the dining room where Grace used to hum while cooking, the hallway where Eli first crawled toward the sound of the piano, the music room where Anna and Eli had found something pure. Each place carried echoes of a life he'd almost lost. Upstairs, Anna couldn't sleep either. She sat by the window of the servants' room, listening to the wind. Ruth stirred in her bed. Can't rest? Anna shook her head. I think Mr. Whitmore's sad. I could hear it in his voice today. Ruth sighed. He's trying to protect us. That kind of worry sounds like sadness sometimes. Can I play something for him tomorrow, to make him feel better? Ruth smiled faintly. Music can't fix everything, baby. But maybe it can help him remember what's good. The next morning, the mansion was quieter than usual. The press still lingered outside the gates, their voices muffled but persistent. Henry avoided the calls, avoided the meetings. He went to the music room instead. The piano sat waiting, sunlight glinting off its polished surface. When Anna entered, she was carrying 2 cups of cocoa. Mama said this might help, she said. Henry looked up surprised. You brought that for me? She nodded, handing him a cup. It's sweet but not too sweet. Mama says sugar helps with bad mornings. He chuckled softly, taking a sip. Your mother's right. Anna climbed onto the piano bench. Can I play something? Please, he said. She began a slow, gentle tune, something simple, wordless, filled with warmth. Eli joined her moments later, guided by the rhythm she set. Together they played something Henry hadn't heard before. It wasn't the beginning or the light I hear. It was something new, soft, steady, strong. When it ended, Henry found his voice only after a long pause. What do you call that? Anna smiled. Hope. He nodded slowly, his eyes damp. It suits you. Later that day, Henry called a press conference outside the estate gates. Dozens of reporters gathered, expecting a statement written by lawyers, full of corporate restraint. But Henry stepped up to the microphone alone. You've written your stories, he said. Some kind, some cruel. But you missed the truth. The truth is simple. A little girl taught my blind son how to see the world. And she taught me how to listen. If that threatens your idea of what's proper, that says more about you than it does about us. He paused, letting the silence stretch. You can print whatever you like, but you won't change what happened in that house. Music played. Children laughed. And for the first time in years, there was joy. Then he stepped back, leaving the cameras flashing behind him. That night, after the crowd dispersed and the house was quiet again, Ruth found Henry standing by the grand piano. "You didn't have to defend us like that," she said softly. "Yes, I did," Henry replied. "You're part of this family now, whether the world approves or not." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay," he said. "At least until the music runs out." She smiled sadly. "Music like this never runs out." In the hallway, Anna and Eli were still awake, listening. The grown-ups' words didn't make much sense to them, but the tone did. It sounded like forgiveness. It sounded like home. Yet, beyond the estate walls, a shadow moved a journalist who hadn't left, watching from the road. He made a call as he snapped one last photo of the mansion glowing in the night. "Yes," he said into the phone. "He just called them family. That's the headline." No. The headline hit the next morning like a punch to the ribs. Whitmore calls Maid'S family his own. Beneath it was a grainy telephoto image. Henry standing by the piano. Ruth beside him, Anna and Eli in the background. The photo was beautiful in truth, but the words beneath it poisoned everything. By noon, talk shows were already dissecting it. "Has Henry Whitmore lost his mind?" one host asked. "Is this charity or something darker?" another insinuated. The headlines didn't need proof, they only needed noise. Inside the mansion, that noise felt like a sickness. Phone calls, reporters at the gate, photographers hiding in the hedges. The staff whispered again, tighter now, afraid. Ruth kept Anna in their room most of the morning. "We'll just stay quiet," she murmured. "Let the storm pass." But storms didn't pass in Henry Whitmore's world, they only grew. In his study, Henry listened to his lawyer on speakerphone. "Henry, this can't continue. The board has voted for a formal review of your position. They're citing conduct unbecoming of a company executive." Henry laughed once, bitterly. "Conduct unbecoming? For helping a child play piano? This is about perception, not truth," the lawyer said carefully. "And perception is the only currency that matters to them." Henry looked out the window where the reporters clustered at the gate. "Then they can keep their currency. I'm done buying their approval." He ended the call. When he finally stepped into the hall, he found Ruth waiting near the door. She looked exhausted. "Sir," she said quietly, "if this is because of us, we can go. I can find another job. We don't want to bring you more trouble." Henry shook his head. "You think this trouble is your fault?" "No. It's mine for not standing up to this world sooner. But they're turning you into a story," she said. "And not the good kind." He gave a faint, tired smile. "Then maybe it's time the story changed." That evening, the sky turned the color of pewter. Rain threatened again. Henry gathered everyone. Ruth, Anna, Eli, even the remaining staff in the great hall. The chandeliers flickered against the gray light. "You've all heard the rumors," he began. "Some of you may even believe them. But let me remind you what this house used to sound like before all of this silence. Cold, endless silence. And now it's alive. That's because of these two children." He looked at Anna and Eli, sitting side by side on the piano bench. "They reminded me that worth doesn't come from power or money. It comes from what you give when no one is watching. I won't apologize for that." No one spoke. Even Mr. Davis lowered his eyes. Ruth's voice broke the silence. "You're risking everything for something people may never understand." Henry turned to her. "Then I'll lose everything for the right reason for once." Later that night, when most of the staff had gone to bed, Henry sat alone in the music room. The lights were low. Eli's small piano stood open, and beside it, the larger grand gleamed in the dim glow. The air smelled faintly of polish and rain. He pressed a few keys absent-mindedly, the sound soft but steady. Then he heard the quiet padding of feet behind him. Anna appeared in the doorway, barefoot in her nightdress. "Mr. Whitmore?" He turned, surprised. "You're supposed to be asleep." I couldn't," she said, stepping closer. The rain sounds sad again. Henry smiled faintly. "It does that." "Can I play?" she asked. He nodded, sliding over on the bench. "Go ahead." She sat beside him, her small fingers finding the first notes of hope. He joined her without thinking, his deep, deliberate chords filling the spaces between her lighter ones. Together, they played quietly, almost like a prayer. The house seemed to breathe with them. When they finished, Anna looked up. "Does the world still sound angry?" Henry thought for a moment. "Yes," he said softly. "But maybe it can't hear us clearly yet." "Then we'll play louder," she said, smiling. He laughed gently. "You always say that." "Because it's true." She hopped down from the bench, hugging him impulsively. He froze, startled, then rested a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you, Anna," he whispered. "For giving this house a heart again." She grinned sleepily. "Good night, Mr. Whitmore." "Good night, Anna." When she left, Henry sat staring at the piano for a long time. For all his wealth, this was the first moment in years he felt rich. The next day brought new chaos. Someone had leaked private information, financial documents tied to the foundation. An anonymous source claimed Henry was using charity funds for personal use. It was nonsense, but it didn't matter. The headline was enough. "Fraud investigation into the Light I Hear Foundation," it read. By midday, the board had frozen his accounts. Reporters crowded the driveway again. The same people who had cheered the music now demanded answers. Ruth found him pacing in the study, papers strewn across the desk. "What happened?" she asked. "They think I stole from the foundation," he said bitterly. "That I used children's suffering to fix my reputation." Her face paled. "That's not true." "Of course it's not, but they don't care." A knock sounded at the door. Mr. Davis entered, his expression tight. "Sir, I think you should see this." He handed Henry a printed email, an anonymous tip sent to several journalists. Attached were internal files from the foundation's accounts, twisted to look incriminating. Henry's stomach turned cold. Someone inside leaked this. Davis hesitated. "I'm afraid so." Henry sank into his chair. For the first time, he looked tired, not just weary, but broken. Ruth stood beside him. "What will you do?" He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Fight it," he said simply. "Because truth still matters, even when the world forgets." That night, as thunder rolled over the estate, Anna and Eli sat in the dark music room. "Is your father in trouble?" Anna asked. "Yes," Eli said quietly. "But he's not scared." "How do you know?" "Because the music hasn't stopped yet." Downstairs, Henry worked by the dim light of a single lamp, documents spread across his desk, determination tightening every line of his face. The storm rattled the windows, but inside, one piano note rang faintly from upstairs, steady, defiant, alive. By the following morning, the storm outside had faded, but the one surrounding the Whitmore family had only grown darker. News vans now lined the front gate. Helicopters circled overhead. Every major outlet carried the same headline: Henry Whitmore under investigation for misuse of foundation funds. Inside, the mansion no longer felt like a sanctuary. Security guards were stationed at the front door. The phone rang endlessly. Reporters, lawyers, associates, even the staff moved quietly, avoiding Henry's eyes as if his downfall might be contagious. Henry hadn't slept. His study was filled with half-drunk cups of coffee and piles of documents. He sat in his shirt sleeves, the tie long discarded, his hair disheveled. For years, he had built an empire through precision, control, and calculation. Now, everything was chaos. Ruth entered softly, setting a tray of breakfast on the desk. "You need to eat something," she said gently. "I can't," Henry replied, not looking up. "If I stop working, I'll think." She hesitated, watching him. "You've done everything you can. The truth will come out." He let out a bitter laugh. "The truth doesn't matter until someone pays to print it." Ruth stepped closer. "Then we'll make them listen. You've faced worse." He met her gaze for the first time. "No, I haven't." His voice cracked. I could lose everything, Ruth. Not the money that doesn't matter, but the foundation, Eli's future. Your safety, Anna's peace. Everything that mattered finally makes me human. And now they're trying to strip it away. She reached out and touched his arm. You became human because of them. That's not something anyone can take. For a long moment, they stood in silence. The air between them felt fragile, full of the unspoken. Then, from the hallway, a sound broke the tension, a soft, familiar melody. The piano. Anna and Eli were playing again. Their music drifted through the house like sunlight through fog. Henry closed his eyes. Even now. They play. Ruth smiled faintly. Maybe because they know you need it. Henry stood. Let's join them. When they entered the music room, the two children looked up but didn't stop playing. Eli sat straight, his small hands moving confidently across the keys. Anna followed, filling the gaps in his rhythm, the two of them breathing in perfect sync. When the song ended, Anna turned in her seat. Mr. Whitmore. Mama said, you're sad again. Henry smiled weakly. I've had better days. Then we should play something happy, she said firmly. Ruth's eyes widened. Anna, but Henry held up a hand. No. Let her. Anna nodded at Eli. Ready? Eli grinned. Always. They began again, this time with something bright and playful, notes chasing one another like laughter. Henry felt his throat tighten. The children didn't understand the stakes, the scandal, the noise outside the gates. But maybe that was their strength. They only understood music, and music, unlike the world, didn't lie. When they finished, Eli said, Did it work, Father? Do you feel better? Henry laughed softly. I do. How did you do that? Anna shrugged. It's just notes. We play the sad ones softer. Later that day, Henry's assistant, Mark, arrived with grim news. The board has called an emergency vote for tomorrow morning. They're likely going to suspend you as CEO until the investigation clears. Henry didn't flinch. So they'll cut off my hands and tell me to fix it without touching anything. Mark looked uncomfortable. Henry, you could still save yourself distance from the foundation, from Ruth, from the girl. Show them this isn't personal. Henry's voice turned sharp. But it is personal. That's the point. Perception matters, Mark insisted. Then maybe perception is the disease, Henry snapped. Mark sighed. If you go down, the foundation goes down too. Henry fell silent, the weight of that truth sinking in. When Mark left, Ruth stepped from the doorway. She had heard everything. You can't let them destroy it, she said softly. Not after all you've built. I won't, Henry said. Even if I have to stand alone. That night, Ruth found him in the study again. Standing before the fireplace, with an envelope in his hands. What's that? She asked. Proof, he said simply. The financial documents, the real ones. The board never saw them because someone doctored the versions that went public. Her heart quickened. You can clear your name. He nodded slowly. If I find who did this. The next morning, Henry arrived at the downtown boardroom. The directors sat in a semicircle, their faces cold and cautious. Cameras were forbidden, but everyone knew the outcome would leak by lunch. Mr. Whitmore, the chairman began. You've been accused of diverting foundation funds for personal use. What do you have to say? Henry placed the envelope on the table. That this, he said, is the truth you should have asked for before selling mine to the press. Mess. He spread out the papers, bank records, audit trails, every document carefully annotated. You're looking at doctored files, planted to look incriminating. I traced the edits to one of our own. He turned his gaze toward the far end of the table. Mr. Davis. The room went still. Mr. Davis, who had served as Henry's butler and now handled internal communications, blinked, his composure cracking. Sir, that's absurd. Henry cut him off. You were the only one with access to both the household network and the foundation systems. And the leak to the press came from an IP address inside this estate. Yours. Murmurs spread through the room. Davis's face paled. I was only trying to protect your reputation. To control the story before it. Before it what? Henry demanded. Before the truth got too inconvenient? The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Davis, you'll remain under internal review pending a full investigation. Mr. Whitmore, it appears you were telling the truth. Henry didn't smile. He just sat back, exhausted. The truth, he said softly, was all I ever had left. By the time he returned home that evening, the sun had already set. The reporters had begun to scatter. Ruth met him at the door, anxiety written on her face. Well, it's over, he said. They believed me. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Thank God. Not yet, he murmured. There's still cleanup to do, but the worst is behind us. From upstairs, piano music drifted faintly, Eli and Anna, as always. Henry smiled faintly. They never stopped, did they? Ruth shook her head. They said they'd play until you came back. He looked up toward the sound. Then I guess I'd better listen. As he walked up the stairs, the melody grew clearer, hopeful, unbroken. Outside, the last of the rain had dried from the drive. The house was breathing again, but as Henry reached the landing, he noticed a letter on the floor outside his study. No stamp, no return address, only 2 words written across the front in perfect black ink, not over. Henry stared at the envelope for a long time before picking it up. The paper was thick, the handwriting elegant, almost old-fashioned. He turned it over in his hands, feeling the faint tremor that came with intuition. This wasn't from a journalist or a lawyer. This was personal. He opened it carefully. Inside, there was only one line written in the same precise script. You may have silenced one lie, but not the truth beneath it. No signature, no hint of origin. He stood in the hallway, the letter trembling slightly between his fingers, until Ruth's voice called softly from the stairs. Mr. Whitmore? Are you all right? He slipped the note into his jacket pocket. Yes, he lied. Just mail from the city. But that night, sleep didn't come easily. He sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames, replaying the last months in his mind, the headlines, the whispers, the endless cycle of defending what should never have needed defense. He had cleared his name, yes. But the letter reminded him that peace in his world was never permanent. By morning, Ruth found him in the same chair, still in yesterday's clothes. You didn't rest, she said quietly. I don't think I know how anymore, he replied. She hesitated before handing him a cup of coffee. Anna and Eli want to play for you. Something they wrote together. He blinked, surprised. They wrote something? Ruth smiled faintly. They said it's called The Quiet After the Storm. He followed her to the music room. The children were already there, sitting side by side at the grand piano. Sunlight filtered through the windows, turning the dust motes into tiny, floating stars. Anna looked up when she saw him. You look tired, Mr. Whitmore. Working on fixing that, he said, forcing a smile. Let's hear what you've made. The first notes were soft, tentative, but carried the delicate balance of 2 hearts learning to speak the same language. Eli's left hand moved with practiced certainty. Anna's right hand danced lightly over the higher keys. The melody rose and fell, sometimes fragile, sometimes bold, like rain returning to the earth. Henry felt something shift in him as he listened. The song carried more than beauty, it carried understanding. Every note seemed to say what none of them had been able to voice. We survived. When the final chord faded, Anna looked up expectantly. Did you like it? Henry's voice caught. It's perfect, he said. It sounds like healing. Ruth, standing quietly in the doorway, wiped her eyes. Can we play it for the people again? Eli asked. Like at Carnegie Hall? Henry hesitated. Perhaps one day soon. But for now, let's keep it ours. So, for a moment, it felt as though calm had finally returned. But peace, Henry knew, had a habit of being brief. Later that afternoon, Mark arrived unannounced. His usual calm demeanor was gone. Henry, he said, closing the study door behind him, you need to see this. He placed a folded newspaper on the desk. The headline read, "Former Whitmore employee claims cover. Up. Foundation records still missing." Henry scanned the article quickly. It quoted an unnamed source, someone claiming that Henry had destroyed files before the investigation. "They're saying I faked my own evidence," he muttered. "It's Davis," Mark said flatly. "He's trying to save himself by dragging you down." Henry set the paper aside, jaw tightening. "Then we'll find him." But Davis was gone. He'd left town overnight, leaving behind a resignation letter that said only, "The truth has many sides." For the next few days, the tension inside the house returned like a bruise resurfacing. Ruth kept to her work, quieter than before. Anna sensed the unease but didn't understand it. Eli grew restless, asking questions no one could answer. One evening, Henry found Anna sitting alone by the piano, her fingers tracing the keys without pressing them. "Why aren't you playing?" he asked. She shrugged. "It doesn't sound right when people are sad." He sat beside her. "Sometimes that's when music matters most." "Then you play," she said softly. "You sound sad too." Henry smiled faintly, pressing a few notes. They echoed through the empty room, low and haunting. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think music was something we created. But now I think it's something that creates us." Anna tilted her head. "So if you stop playing, you stop being you?" He looked at her, startled by the simplicity of her question. "Maybe," he admitted. "Then don't stop," she said firmly. That night, Henry made another decision. If the world wanted to keep questioning him, he'd stop hiding. He would host a final performance open to the public, free to all. The concert would showcase not him, but the children, the ones his foundation had begun to help, including Eli and Anna. It would be his last statement. Let the truth sing for itself. When Ruth heard the plan, she was silent for a long moment. "You really want to put them on stage again, after everything?" "Yes," Henry said. "Because hiding will only feed the lies. They can twist words, but they can't twist what people hear with their own hearts." Ruth nodded slowly. "Then I'll stand with you." The news spread fast. "Whitmore announces free concert for Children's Foundation," the headline said. But beneath the excitement, critics murmured that it was desperation, a man trying to polish his name before the fall. Henry ignored them. He spent every night rehearsing with the children, letting their laughter fill the spaces his fear had left hollow. Anna, with her quick ear and fearless joy, kept them all moving forward. Eli, blind but certain, led with confidence that reminded Henry of everything he'd once lost and found again. A week before the performance, Henry received another envelope, this one identical to the first. Inside, a single line. "Every song ends, Henry. Be ready for the silence." He stood there for a long time, reading the words again and again. Whoever was sending these letters wasn't finished. He looked up toward the sound of the piano upstairs, the children's laughter between chords, and felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. Whoever wanted to end his music wasn't done yet. The days leading up to the Foundation's concert moved both too quickly and too slowly, like a heartbeat caught between fear and hope. The Whitmore mansion, once again filled with the sound of children practicing, felt like a fragile bubble of warmth surrounded by a world that wanted to burst it. Every morning, Henry sat in the music room, notebook in hand, watching Eli and Anna rehearse the final duet. The piece they'd written, "The Quiet After the Storm," had grown into something vast and full of feeling. It began with hesitation and ended in triumph, a reflection of everything they had endured together. Ruth watched from the doorway most days, torn between pride and worry. The letters Henry had received were still a secret to her, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he lingered near the windows, scanning the driveway as if expecting something or someone to appear. On the third night of rehearsals, while the children slept, Henry sat in his study going through paperwork for the concert logistics. The house was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock. Then came the sound, an envelope sliding under the study door. He froze. Slowly, he stood and crossed the room. The envelope was identical to the others. Inside, in the same precise script, were 6 words. "Not everyone loves the sound of truth." Henry's hands clenched. He turned on the security monitor, scanning every camera feed. Nothing, no figure at the door, no car on the drive. It was as if the letter had appeared out of thin air. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, Ruth noticed the fatigue etched into his face. "You're pale," she said, setting a plate of toast on his desk. "Are you sure this concert is a good idea? Maybe it's time to rest." "I can rest when this is over," he murmured. "Henry." She rarely used his first name, and when she did, it meant fear. "If someone's threatening you, it's just noise," he interrupted. "Someone trying to scare me. But it's working," she said quietly. He looked up, meeting her eyes. "If I stop now, they win. And the wrong story becomes the truth." Later that afternoon, Henry took the children to the City Hall auditorium, where the concert would be held. The building smelled faintly of dust and old velvet curtains. Rows of empty seats stretched before them. Anna gasped softly. "It's so big," she whispered. Eli smiled. "You can't see it, but it sounds big too." Henry chuckled. "It does. And in 2 days, it'll be full of people waiting to hear you." Anna's hands fidgeted. "What if I mess up?" "Then you'll keep going," Henry said. "That's all any of us can do." As they rehearsed, a figure stood quietly at the back of the hall, Mark Evans, Henry's assistant. When Henry noticed him, he motioned him over. "What is it?" Henry asked. Mark's face was tense. "We traced the last letter." Henry's chest tightened. "And?" "It came from an internal courier, someone who used to work for the foundation before you fired them. A man named Harold Crane. He handled public relations." Henry frowned, the name stirring a faint memory. "He was close with Davis." "Very," Mark said. "After Davis left, Crane started contacting journalists. He's the one feeding these stories. Do we know what he wants?" "Revenge. He blames you for Davis's downfall." Henry exhaled slowly. "Of course he does. Should I call security? The police?" Henry shook his head. "No. If he's watching, let him see what we're building. He'll learn that the truth doesn't scare so easily." That night, back at the mansion, Henry couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching from the dark. He checked the locks twice before going upstairs. Outside, the trees whispered against the wind. In her small room, Anna couldn't sleep either. She lay awake, listening to the wind howl through the branches. She turned toward her mother's bed. "Mama," she whispered, "do you think people can hate good things?" Ruth stirred. "What kind of good things?" "Like songs," Anna said. "Like music that makes people feel." Ruth thought for a moment. "Yes, baby. Some people hate what reminds them of what they've lost." Anna frowned. "That's sad." "It is," Ruth said softly. "But it's not your burden to carry." The next morning, the household moved with quiet purpose. Instruments were tuned, sheet music packed, clothes ironed. Henry oversaw everything, forcing himself into calm efficiency, but his thoughts kept circling back to the letters. Whoever Crane was, he was bold, too bold to stop now. At noon, as Henry walked through the foyer, he noticed something strange. The front door was slightly ajar. He stepped closer and found a single white rose lying on the floor mat. Attached to its stem was a small note, the same sharp handwriting as before. "See you at the finale." A chill ran through him. He looked out the open door, nothing but empty drive. By the time Ruth found him, the color had drained from his face. "Henry, what is it?" He held up the rose, his hand trembling. "The man who's been sending the letters, he plans to be at the concert." Ruth's breath caught. "You have to cancel it." "No," he said firmly. "If I cancel, everyone who believed the lies wins. I won't let fear silence them again." But what if he tries to hurt someone?" Henry looked toward the piano room, where Anna and Eli were laughing, unaware of the storm about to gather. "Then he'll have to go through me first." That evening, as the sun set over the estate, the music room glowed with golden light. The two children played their duet again, soft, clear, unafraid. Ruth watched them with tears in her eyes. Henry stood by the door, hands clasped, his gaze steady. For a brief moment, the fear, the letters, the noise, all of it faded beneath the sound of their music. But even as the final notes faded into silence, a distant engine growled beyond the gate, a single car pulling up in the dark. Someone had arrived early for the finale. The night of the concert arrived under a bruised sky. Heavy and low. Rain threatened but never came. Hanging in the air like a held breath, the City Hall auditorium gleamed under the lights, banners of the Light I Hear Foundation fluttering above the doors. A crowd gathered, early supporters, journalists, skeptics, and those simply curious to see the billionaire who had become both saint and scandal. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. The stage crew whispered in corners. The ushers moved briskly down the aisles. Cameras from major news outlets stood ready at the back, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. Backstage, Henry checked every detail. He wore a dark suit, simple and unadorned. Beside him, Ruth adjusted Anna's white dress, smoothing the ribbon at her waist. Eli stood quietly near the piano, his small hands clasped. "You both look ready," Henry said, his voice calm but tight. Anna nodded, but her eyes darted toward the curtain. "There's so many people," she whispered. "That just means more hearts to listen," he said gently. Eli smiled. "We'll be fine, Father. We practiced the hard part." Henry rested a hand on his son's shoulder. "I know you did." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "If anything feels wrong tonight, anything, you stop playing and step off stage. Do you understand?" Eli frowned. "Why would something be wrong?" Henry forced a smile. "Just precaution." Ruth studied him. "This is about the letters, isn't it?" Henry didn't answer. He simply met her gaze and said, "Stay close to them. No matter what." Moments later, the stage manager called, 5 minutes. The lights dimmed in the auditorium. The chatter softened. Henry stepped onto the stage first, greeted by polite applause. He stood behind the microphone, his tall frame silhouetted against the glow of the stage lights. "Good evening," he began. "Thank you for being here. Tonight isn't about headlines or redemption. It's about music, about 2 children who reminded me what it means to feel alive." He turned slightly, gesturing toward the curtain. "Please welcome Eli Whitmore and Anna Johnson." The applause swelled as the 2 children stepped into the light. Anna held Eli's hand, guiding him carefully to the bench. She glanced at Henry, who nodded once. Then, silence. Anna lifted her small hands. The first notes fell like drops of water, soft, pure, fragile. Eli followed, weaving in harmony. The hall filled slowly, the melody unfolding like a sunrise after months of storm. For a while it was perfect. Henry stood in the wings, his heart pounding with something close to peace. The music was working, he could feel it. Even the restless journalists seemed caught in the spell. Then, movement caught his eye. At the back of the auditorium, a man stood apart from the crowd, dressed in a gray coat. Tall, still. Even from a distance, Henry knew it was Crane, the man who had sent the letters. Crane's face was pale, his expression unreadable. He wasn't clapping, wasn't smiling. He simply stood there, watching. Henry's instincts screamed. He moved subtly toward the security guard near the stage exit. "That man in the back gray coat," he whispered. "Don't let him leave." The guard nodded, moving off quietly. On stage, the music swelled into its middle section faster now, more confident. Anna's hair shimmered under the lights. Eli tilted his head slightly, following her lead. Henry forced his focus back to them, his chest tightening with pride and fear at once. Then Crane moved. He started walking down the aisle, slow but deliberate. The guard turned, but another figure blocked his path. 2 men, not one. Henry's blood went cold. Crane reached into his coat. "Stop," Henry shouted, stepping into the light. The music broke off in a jagged chord. Gasps rippled through the audience. Eli froze at the keys. Anna turned toward Henry in confusion. Security rushed forward, tackling Crane before he could raise his hand. The coat tore open, no weapon, just a crumpled envelope. It fell to the floor, scattering its contents. Henry moved closer, trembling. Inside were dozens of photographs, Henry, Ruth, the children, all taken over weeks. and beneath them, a single sentence written in that same elegant hand. "You can't control how the world sees love," the audience murmured, cameras flashing wildly. Crane shouted from the floor, "You built your charity on lies. You pretend to care, but it's all performance. You use those children for your image." Henry's voice cut through the chaos. "No," he said firmly. "Those children saved me from being a man without one." Security dragged Crane away. The crowd was buzzing, some frightened, others angry. Henry turned toward the piano, where Anna still sat, small and trembling. "It's all right," he said softly, crossing the stage. He knelt beside her. "You're safe." She looked up at him, her eyes wet. "Did we do something wrong?" He shook his head. "You did everything right." Eli reached for her hand. "Can we finish the song, Father?" Henry hesitated. The crowd was restless. Flashing lights and murmurs filling the space. But Eli's blind eyes were steady, his voice calm. "If we stop now, he wins." Henry felt a lump rise in his throat. He looked at the audience, then back at the two small figures at the piano. "Then finish it," he whispered. Anna took a deep breath. "Ready?" Eli nodded, and then they played. The sound that filled the hall was different this time, richer, rawer, threaded with courage. The melody rose above the noise, reclaiming the room. One by one, the murmurs faded. By the time the final note hung in the air, the crowd was silent again, not out of fear, but awe. When the applause finally came, it was thunderous. People stood, clapping, crying, shouting their names. The noise was overwhelming, but the feeling was pure. Henry stood behind them, tears in his eyes. Ruth joined him on stage, one hand over her heart. For the first time in months, there was no pretense, no doubt, only truth. Later, as the auditorium emptied and the cameras dimmed, Henry found a final envelope on the piano. This one was unsigned, but the handwriting was different, gentler. It read, "Not all stories end in silence. Some become symphonies." He looked at the children, sleeping against each other on the piano bench, and then at Ruth. "Let them rest," he said softly. "They've earned it." Outside, the rain finally fell, not in anger, but in relief. The rain outside the auditorium lasted until dawn, washing the city clean. By morning, every paper, news feed, and channel carried the same image. Two children at a piano, drenched in golden light, playing through fear. The night the music won. For the first time, the headlines were kind. Henry sat at the kitchen table in the mansion, his tie loosened, coffee gone cold. The world, for once, was on his side again. But he didn't feel victorious, only hollow. The chaos had ended. But it had taken something from all of them. Ruth entered quietly, a newspaper tucked under her arm. "They're calling it courage," she said softly. "They say you turned fear into art." Henry gave a small smile. "I didn't play a single note." Maybe not," she said, "but you taught them how to listen." He looked up at her, then really looked, and for the first time, she didn't look like the maid who worked in the background of his life. She looked like the person who had stood beside him through every battle. "I should thank you," he said. "You could have taken Anna and left long ago." Ruth smiled faintly. "And missed the best concert of my life." "No, sir. We've both learned to stay through storms." "Oh." A sound came from the hallway. Small footsteps, laughter. Anna and Eli ran in, their joy unburdened. "We were on TV again," Anna said breathlessly. "Mama, Mr. Whitmore, they said we're famous." Eli grinned. "I told you people liked the song." Henry laughed, the first real laugh in months. "So it seems," he said. "What do famous musicians want for breakfast?" "Chocolate chip pancakes," Anna said immediately. Ruth rolled her eyes. "You had those yesterday." Eli lifted his chin playfully. "Artists need consistency." The room filled with laughter. For a brief, shining moment, the house felt like home again, not a battlefield, not a refuge, but something whole. Later that afternoon, while the children practiced in the music room, Ruth joined Henry in the study. She placed a small box on his desk. "This came for you this morning," she said. Henry frowned. "Another letter?" "No," she said. "Different handwriting this time. I already checked." Inside the box lay a small silver key and a folded note. He opened it. "To the man who refused silence, use this to unlock what you built. The world is ready now." There was no name, no address. Only an embossed symbol at the bottom, the logo of the Light I Hear Foundation. Henry's pulse quickened. "It's the key to the downtown office," he said quietly. "The foundation headquarters. You think someone left it for you?" He nodded slowly. "Maybe Mark. Maybe one of the board. It doesn't matter. It's time I went back." Ruth hesitated. "After everything?" "Yes," Henry said. "The music isn't just ours anymore. It belongs to every child who needs to be heard." That evening, they drove into the city together. The foundation's building was quiet, its tall glass facade gleaming under the streetlights. Inside, the air smelled of polish and new beginnings. The office had been restored, papers neatly stacked, the piano in the lobby tuned and waiting. Henry walked slowly through the space, fingertips brushing over desks and files. He paused at a framed photograph of the concert pinned to the wall. Anna and Eli, mid-performance, faces glowing with concentration. Below it, a brass plaque read, "Here with your heart." Ruth noticed it too. "That's what Anna's bracelet says," she murmured. Henry smiled. "She taught me those words. I thought I was teaching them music, but they were teaching me how to live." As they stood there, the front door opened. Mark Evans stepped inside, raincoat still dripping. "You beat me here," he said. Henry turned. "Was that your note?" Mark nodded. "I thought you'd want the key back yourself. The board reinstated you officially this morning. No conditions." Ruth's hand flew to her mouth. "That's wonderful." Henry smiled faintly. "It's something. But I'm not going back as a CEO." Mark frowned. "Then what?" "As a teacher," Henry said simply, "the foundation doesn't need another executive. It needs someone who remembers what it's for." Mark's expression softened. "Then I'll make the announcement." When he left, the building fell silent again, except for the sound of the rain outside. Ruth looked at Henry with quiet pride. "You really mean to do this?" "I do," he said. "I spent half my life chasing numbers, the other half defending them. This," he gestured to the piano, the hall, the plaque. "This is what matters now." Back at the mansion that night, the children had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up under a blanket. The television still played faint footage of the concert, the sound muted but recognizable. Henry draped another blanket over them and stood watching for a moment. Ruth joined him, her voice low. "You know," she said, "most people never get to rebuild like this." He looked at her. "And you? What do you want to rebuild?" She smiled softly. "A life where my daughter can grow without fear." "No." He nodded. "Then we'll build it together." In the days that followed, the foundation's doors reopened. Children from across the city came, blind, deaf, disabled, each carrying their own small spark of music. Henry taught them alongside Anna and Eli, who quickly became the heart of the program. Every morning, the building filled with sound, laughter, mistakes, learning, harmony. Reporters eventually stopped coming. The world moved on, as it always does. But inside those walls, something timeless grew. One evening, after the last child had gone home, Henry sat at the grand piano with Eli and Anna. The room was bathed in sunset light. Anna played the first notes of The Quiet After the Storm, and Eli followed. Their fingers moved easily, effortlessly, weaving hope and memory into sound. Henry joined them on the lower keys, the three melodies blending into one. When the song ended, the light had turned gold. Anna looked up. "Mr. Whitmore, what comes after the storm now?" Henry smiled. "Peace, if we're lucky. But if not, more music." Ruth, standing in the doorway, whispered to herself. "More music then." Outside, the city hummed, alive with distant sirens and the rhythm of ordinary life. But within those walls, it was quiet, peaceful, alive. The storm had passed, leaving only harmony, and for the first time in years, Henry Whitmore believed it might last. Months passed, and the rhythm of life at the foundation found its steady beat. Every morning began with the sound of children tuning instruments, of laughter spilling through the halls, of music that belonged to no one and everyone all at once. The Light I Hear Foundation had become more than Henry ever imagined, a sanctuary for those who had been told they didn't belong. For Henry, the days were filled with purpose again. He arrived early, often before the staff, walking the halls in quiet gratitude. He'd stop by the piano room where Eli and Anna were nearly always the first to arrive, their fingers already warming up the keys. Ruth had taken on an official role now, coordinator of family programs, and though she still moved with the gentle care of a housekeeper, there was pride in her posture that hadn't been there before. One morning, as sunlight flooded the high glass windows, Eli played the opening notes of The Quiet After the Storm. Anna joined him, her tone softer now, more refined. They'd grown since the first time they'd played together, older, wiser, but still filled with the same wonder. Henry listened from the doorway, smiling to himself. "Do you ever get tired of hearing that one?" Ruth asked quietly, appearing beside him with a clipboard in hand. "Never," Henry said. "It reminds me what we went through to get here." Ruth looked at him thoughtfully. "It's strange, isn't it? All the noise, the cameras, the lies, and now, this quiet. Almost feels unreal." "Maybe peace always feels that way," Henry said softly, "like something we borrowed from a dream." That afternoon, the foundation hosted a small event for donors and parents, a recital by the children. The room filled with gentle applause, the sound of coffee cups, the faint murmur of conversation. Henry stood at the back, watching proudly as one of the younger students, a girl with hearing aids, played a solo piece entirely by vibration and memory. When it was Anna and Eli's turn, the room hushed instantly. They'd chosen to perform a new composition, something they'd written together without Henry's help. Anna called it "The Light Between Us." As they played, Henry felt a lump rise in his throat. The music was different this time, less about loss, more about discovery. It was as if the children were showing him that they no longer needed saving. They were saving themselves. The final note lingered like a breath held too long, then released. Applause filled the hall. Ruth wiped tears from her cheeks. Henry closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. After the recital, a man approached Henry. He was older, gray-haired, with the look of someone who had seen both success and regret. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, extending his hand. "My name's David Crane." Henry froze. "Crane?" The man nodded, reading the alarm on Henry's face. "Not that Crane. His brother, Harold, passed away 2 months ago." Henry blinked, stunned. "I didn't know." David nodded solemnly. "I found your letters among his things. I thought you should know. He wasn't always like that. He used to believe in what you were doing. When he lost his job, something broke in him." Henry's voice softened. "Grief has a way of distorting good men." David handed him a small envelope. "He wanted this returned to you. Said it was yours from the beginning." After the man left, Henry sat alone in his office and opened the envelope. Inside was one of the earlier threatening notes, the very first one that had read, "You may have silenced one lie, but not the truth beneath it." But beneath those words, written faintly in pencil, was another line he hadn't seen before. "Sometimes the truth needs a melody to survive." "No." Henry sat back, letting out a slow breath. Whatever Harold Crane had meant to do, in the end, he'd left a message of understanding, a strange, unfinished peace offering. That night, the foundation was empty except for the 4 of them: Henry, Ruth, Anna, and Eli. The children were playing quietly in the piano room again, working on another song. Ruth leaned against the doorframe. "What did the letter say?" she asked. Henry folded it gently. "That maybe forgiveness has more than one author." She nodded slowly. "You going to forgive him?" "I already have," Henry said. "For him, for myself. for all the noise that almost took this away. Ruth smiled. Then maybe it's time you wrote your own letter. Something that ends it right. Henry glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. Maybe I will. He looked toward the piano. Anna, Eli, come here a moment. The children ran over, breathless with excitement. Yes, Mr. Whitmore, Anna said. He knelt to meet their eyes. I want you two to help me compose something new. A song for the foundation. Eli grinned. What's it called? Henry paused, thinking. I don't know yet. Maybe The Sound of Tomorrow. Something full of hope. Anna clapped her hands. Can it have a big ending? The biggest, Henry said, smiling, but not too loud. The best endings whisper. They spent the next few hours around the piano, sketching melodies, laughing, experimenting. Ruth hummed softly from the side, sometimes offering a line or two of suggestion. By the time they finished, the night was deep and still. Henry looked around the room, the grand piano, the children leaning sleepily against each other, Ruth's quiet smile, and felt something rare and full. Completion. He rose, switching off the main light. Come on, he said softly. Let's go home. Eli yawned. Mr. Whitmore? Yes, son? Eli smiled faintly at the word son. When we play the new song, will people understand it? Henry paused in the doorway. If they listen with their hearts, he said. They will. As they left the building, the city hummed around them, alive, imperfect, beautiful. The lights reflected off the rain-wet streets like scattered stars. Ruth walked beside him, her daughter's small hand in hers. Eli held his father's. For once, there were no reporters, no cameras, no noise, only the quiet sound of their footsteps and the faint melody that seemed to linger in the air behind them. Tomorrow, the world would move on again. But tonight, for this small family stitched together by loss, kindness, and music, the world was enough. The final chapter of their story began on a quiet Sunday morning, 1 year after the concert that had changed everything. The Light I Hear Foundation had grown into something no one, not even Henry, had dared to imagine. What had started as one man's redemption had become a movement. Music schools across the country now carried its name, each one a home for children who had been told that silence was their fate. Henry stood on the steps of the foundation's new headquarters, a restored old church in upstate New York. The morning sun slanted through the stained glass, painting the marble floor in shards of color. The building hummed softly with life, children's voices, laughter, the distant echo of piano practice. Ruth approached from behind, clipboard in hand, her expression a blend of exhaustion and contentment. The buses from Chicago just arrived, she said. We're at full capacity. Henry smiled faintly. Good. That's how it should be. He looked out across the front lawn, where Anna and Eli were sitting beneath a maple tree, sheet music spread around them. They were older now, taller, more confident, but still carried the same spark that had once lit his darkened world. Do you ever think about how it all began? Ruth asked quietly. Henry nodded. Every day. A blind boy who couldn't see his own worth. A little girl who refused to stay quiet. And a man who thought he'd already lived his story. And, she asked, and they proved him wrong. The sound of children calling for Anna and Eli drew their attention. A small group had gathered, instruments in hand, eager to learn. Anna stood, brushing off her dress, and motioned for them to follow her to the practice hall. Eli picked up his cane but didn't need much guidance. He knew every inch of the grounds by sound alone. Ruth watched them go, smiling. They've become quite the teachers themselves. Henry nodded. They were always teachers. I was just the student who took too long to learn. Later that afternoon, the foundation hosted its annual recital. Families filled the pews, their faces glowing in the light of the old church. The stage was modest, a piano, a few chairs, a backdrop painted by the children. Above it hung a simple wooden sign that read, "Hear with your heart." Henry stepped to the microphone to welcome everyone. 1 year ago, he began. 2 children sat at a piano and reminded the world that music isn't about perfection, it's about connection. Today, you'll hear what that connection has grown into. Applause rippled through the room. He stepped aside as Anna and Eli took their places at the piano. The children around them prepared their instruments, a small orchestra of hope. The first notes began a melody soft as a whisper, steady as breathing. It was the sound of tomorrow, the piece they had written together. The music rose, shimmering, full of new beginnings. It wasn't polished, but it was real. Every mistake, every pause, every heartbeat was part of it. Henry stood at the side, hands folded. He could see Ruth in the front row, tears shining on her cheeks as she mouthed the words silently. "You did it." But Henry shook his head. "We did." As the song reached its peak, Eli turned slightly, his head tilted as if listening for something unseen. Then Anna added a quiet counter-melody, something spontaneous, something alive. The two melodies wove together, intertwining, lifting higher and higher until the room itself seemed to breathe. And when the final note fell, it lingered in the air, a single, trembling reminder that beauty lives in imperfection. The applause that followed wasn't loud or frantic. It was warm, deep, human. The kind of sound made by people who had witnessed something they didn't quite have words for. Afterward, when the crowd had gone and the children were packing their instruments, Henry lingered in the empty hall. The last of the sunlight filtered through the stained glass, falling over the piano like a blessing. Ruth joined him, setting down a stack of programs. "You didn't give your closing speech," she said. He smiled. They didn't need one. The music said everything. She studied him for a long moment. "What will you do now?" He chuckled softly. "Maybe take a day off. Or two." "Oh, do you think you'll ever stop?" Henry looked around the hall, the instruments, the benches, the faint echoes of laughter still hanging in the air. "No," he said, "because stopping would mean silence. And I've learned that silence isn't peace, it's absence. This is peace." They stood there quietly until Ruth said, "You know, you never wrote that letter, the one you said would end it right." Henry nodded. "Maybe I still should." That evening, back at his desk, he finally did. The letter was simple. "To whoever finds this, I once believed music was something made of notes and time. But now I know it's made of people, their hearts, their pain, their kindness. I have seen it heal the blind, humble the proud, and bring light to those who thought they'd never see again. If you ever lose faith in the world, listen for its melody. It's always there, even when the noise is louder. Especially then, here with your heart." Henry Whitmore. He folded the letter and placed it inside the Foundation's piano, between the strings where it would vibrate quietly with every song played. Outside, the stars began to appear. In her small dormitory room, Anna lay awake, listening to the hum of crickets outside. "Mama?" she whispered. "Yes, baby?" Ruth replied, half asleep. "Do you think the world hears us now?" Ruth smiled into the darkness. "I think it always did. It just needed someone brave enough to play loud enough." Across the hall, Eli slept with his fingers still resting on the piano keys. The night air was cool, calm, full of promise. And in the heart of the building, the place where all their stories had converged, a faint vibration stirred from within the piano. The strings hummed softly, as if the instrument itself was alive. It was the sound of tomorrow, and it never stopped playing. The story of Anna, Eli, and Mr. Whitmore reminds us that compassion can cross any boundary, race, class, or status. It teaches that music, like kindness, doesn't need sight or wealth to be understood. It only needs a heart that listens. Through struggle and misunderstanding, they discovered that true worth isn't found in titles or appearances, but in how we lift others when no one is watching. The greatest lesson of all is that love and empathy, once shared, become the most powerful kind of music, one that continues long after the final note fades.